The alien twin sisters chose one human. The entire galaxy couldn't believe why. The first thing I heard when I walked into the break room on sub-level 4 was Ailey saying my name. Not the ambassador's name, not the director's name. Mine. Nathan Cole, she said, and her voice was the kind of quiet that made the whole room tilt sideways. We have decided. I was holding a protein brick I hadn't bitten into yet. Sorvin stood just behind her sister, both of them glowing faintly the way they always did, that pale gold light that pulsed from beneath their skin like something alive was trying to get out. 17 people were in that break room. A cleaning drone hummed near the recycling bin. Nobody moved. Decided what? I asked, because I genuinely did not know. You, Ailey said. We have decided on you. That was 4 minutes before the entire galactic feed collapsed under the weight of the story. I want to be clear about something before I explain how the next 14 months of my life became the most absurd, exhausting, and quietly meaningful experience any human being has ever had. I am not special. I grew up in a mid-sized city in northern England, the son of a plumber and a school librarian. I studied interspecies diplomatic protocol because it seemed stable and I liked languages. I was assigned to the interstellar conclave at 29 as a low-level aide, which mostly meant I scheduled meetings, handled translation errors, and occasionally got lost on level 2. Which is embarrassing because level 2 has only 4 corridors. The Valthari twin sisters were something else entirely. Alis and Sorvin had been alive for over 40,000 years. They were the spiritual and political authority that held the conclave's oldest alliances together. 32 civilizations treated their word as law, not because they demanded it, but because they had been right so consistently and for so long that disagreeing with them had started to seem statistically foolish. They had watched species rise. They had watched species collapse. They had, apparently, watched us. The bonded counsel they offered me was not a title that existed before that day. They created it, for me, a human, for reasons they did not immediately share with anyone, including me. By the time I finished my protein brick, I had 411 messages waiting. The first one was from my direct supervisor, Director Lena Marsh, and it said, in full, Nathan, my office, now, also what did you do? The second was from the Keth Dominion's senior ambassador, a being named Varric Sol, who was approximately 3 meters tall, and had spent the better part of 2 centuries cultivating the Valthari's goodwill. His message was not polite, I will not repeat it, but the general meaning was that he considered this an insult to his entire civilization, and that he intended to say so formally, loudly, and repeatedly. The rest were press requests mostly. I met with Alis and Sorvin the following morning in one of the upper chambers, a room with a curved ceiling made entirely of observation glass that looked directly into open space. They sat across from me, their bioluminescent light shifting between gold and a very faint silver, and they asked me to describe my morning routine. I told them. I wake up, I make tea, I read whatever briefings came in overnight, I walk to work because the transit lines on my residential level are unreliable, and I stopped trusting them after the 3rd time they stranded me near the water processing units. They listened the way very old things listen, not politely, not impatiently, but with a kind of complete attention that made me feel like every word was being pressed between glass and kept. Sorvin asked why I made tea instead of taking a nutrition supplement, which would be faster and more efficient. I told her that efficiency was not the point of the morning, that the morning was for easing into the day rather than launching yourself at it, that some things deserved to be done slowly not because they required it, but because you did. She and her sister looked at each other. Something passed between them that I could not read. You said that without thinking, Alis observed. Most true things come out that way, I said. That exchange, I later learned, was replayed on the galactic feed approximately 9 million times. Someone had a recorder running. Someone always has a recorder running. The formal inquiry came 3 weeks later. The Conclave Council convened in the Grand Chamber, a hall that seated representatives from over 400 species and had acoustics so precise that a whisper from the back row arrived at the front row perfectly intact. I had been in that chamber twice before, both times carrying documents for someone more important than me. I sat in it now at the central table, beside the Valthari sisters, facing a row of senior representatives, who ranged in their expression from skeptical to openly offended. Ambassador Varric Sol of the Keth Dominion opened. He was controlled, precise, and devastating. He laid out the case against me not with anger, but with data. Humanity had been part of the conclave for 63 years. We had no military standing, no significant resource holdings, no technological innovations the galaxy hadn't seen before in some form. Our lifespan was brief. Our emotional regulation, by galactic standards, was poor. We cried at things. We laughed at things that weren't funny. We named objects we were emotionally attached to, including vehicles and houseplants. We had a documented tendency to act against our own best interests when we felt something strongly enough. He was not wrong about any of it. The Voss Collective's representative, a shimmering cluster of connected nodes that spoke in a soft, synchronized chorus, added that a bonded council to the Veilthari required beings of stability, foresight, and proven judgment. They presented 3 other candidates, one from the Keth, one from the ancient Orith sovereignty, one from their own collective, each with thousands of years of service and records that made mine look like a sticky note left on a monument. I listened to all of it. I took notes. Old habit. When they finished, the chamber looked at me. Director Marsh had offered me a prepared statement. Someone in Conclave Public Relations had drafted something with phrases like, "the unique human contribution to galactic discourse," and "a bridge between civilizations." It was fine. It was the kind of fine that disappears from memory before you finish reading it. I set it aside. I told them about my grandfather instead. His name was Arthur Cole. He grew up with very little and built a small electrical repair business over 30 years. The kind of business where he knew every customer by name and their dog's name and what they'd been going through lately. When the economy in his region collapsed, he lost almost everything. He was 61 years old. Most people would have accepted it. The math said to accept it. He didn't. Not because he was certain it would work out. He told me once when I was 12 that he had no idea if it would work out. He said the fear never went away. He said some mornings he sat in his van in the car park outside the new workshop he'd rented for almost nothing, and he could not make himself go inside for 20 minutes. Then he went inside. He rebuilt it. Smaller this time, but real. He worked until he was 78 and he retired, because his knees gave out, not because he quit. I told the chamber that I wasn't sharing this story to make a point about human perseverance in the inspirational sense. I told it because I wanted them to understand something specific. My grandfather was not a great man by any measure the galaxy would recognize. He had no power. He had no particular wisdom. He was afraid most of the time, and he did the thing anyway, and he never pretended otherwise. And the reason I knew all of this was because he told me, plainly, without dressing it up, because he thought it was more useful to me to know the truth of it than to have the comfortable version. I told the chamber that I had grown up believing that was normal, that honesty about fear and failure was the default, that you said what was true even when the true thing was uncomfortable, that you kept going not because you were built to but because you looked at the alternative and it seemed worse. I told them I had only recently understood that this was not, in fact, common, that across the galaxy's oldest and most accomplished civilizations, the pattern ran the other way, that the longer a species existed, the more it optimized, and the more it optimized, the less it could afford to be honest about the things that didn't fit the model. The chamber was quiet. I had not raised my voice once. I was not sure if that was courage or just the particular kind of numbness that comes from being too far past the point of turning back. Ailey stood. She spoke for a long time, and I will not pretend to remember every word exactly, but the shape of it stayed with me. She said that she and her sister had spent 40,000 years watching civilizations build themselves into things of great efficiency and great brittleness. She said the Keth had become extraordinary warriors by removing everything that slowed them down, including doubt, including grief, including the particular kind of second-guessing that sometimes stops a very powerful being from making a very permanent mistake. She said the Voss had become extraordinary thinkers by the same method, and that their collective memory was a marvel, and that they had not changed a significant decision in 600 years because their model told them they did not need to. She said the bonded council was not ceremonial. It was not an honor to be awarded. It was a function. The sisters were powerful enough to reshape the policies that governed 400 species, and power of that scale required someone beside it who would say, clearly and without performance, when the reasoning had gone wrong. She said they had watched dozens of species over the centuries. They had waited for a candidate who would not tell them what they wanted to hear, who would not optimize their honesty for comfort, who had learned, through something other than design, to sit with the hard thing and speak it plainly. She looked at me when she said the last part. Nathan Cole has made 3 significant errors in his work during the period of our observation, she said. In each instance, he did not conceal them. He did not rationalize them. He acknowledged them, experienced what appeared to be genuine discomfort, and then corrected his course. No performance, no strategy. He simply did what was necessary and moved forward. Sorvin spoke next, and her voice was quieter than her sister's, with a quality to it like something said in an empty room where sound carries further than expected. Every great civilization represented in this chamber, she said, has forgotten what it was to be small. They have optimized the memory of smallness away, because it is inefficient to carry. Nathan Hale has not forgotten. He does not intend to. And it is precisely because he has not forgotten that he will tell us the truth when truth is the last thing power wants to hear. The vote to uphold the bonding was not unanimous. 3 delegations abstained. Varak Sol of the Keth voted against, formally and without drama, and I respected him for it. He had been honest about his objection from the beginning, and honesty is something I have learned to recognize regardless of whether it lands in my favor. He found me afterward in the corridor outside the chamber. He was very tall up close. Most things that have been alive for 2,000 years are. He looked at me for a moment with his 4 pale eyes, each of them the color of deep water, and he said, "I still do not understand it." "Neither do I said, honestly. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I was about to say something polite and leave. "I believe," he said slowly, "that may be the point." He walked away before I could respond, which was probably for the best, because I had nothing useful to say and I knew it. The first 6 months of my role were not what I expected, though in fairness I did not know what to expect, so that may be setting the bar unfairly low. I attended every major session the sisters held with conclave representatives. I sat beside them and I listened, and when they came to conclusions I thought were too clean, I said so. Not loudly, not dramatically. I just said, usually something like, "I want to make sure we've considered the part where this falls apart," and then I described the part where it fell apart. Sometimes they had already considered it. Sometimes they hadn't. When they hadn't, Sorvin would look at me with something I had started to recognize as appreciation, though on a face that had existed for 40,000 years it was subtle. I got things wrong too, regularly. That was part of it. I told them when I did. We moved on. The Galactic feed never fully lost interest in me. There were entire programs dedicated to analyzing what the humans would do next, now that one of them sat beside the 2 most influential figures in known space. There was speculation about whether I was a diplomatic masterstroke or a catastrophic mistake. There were polls. I tried not to read the polls. Lena Marsh sent me a message about 7 months in that just said, "You know this is the strangest thing that has ever happened in the history of our species, yes?" I told her yes, I was aware. She sent back a single laugh emoji and nothing else. That felt right. About a year into the role, the Orith sovereignty brought a trade dispute to the sisters that had been building for decades. 3 civilizations, overlapping resource claims, 2 of them with military capacity that made the negotiation feel like a conversation happening directly above open flame. The sisters had been presented with a proposed resolution that technically worked on paper and would absolutely fracture 2 of the alliances within a generation. I said so in the session. Not with data. I didn't have the data. I said it because the proposed resolution reminded me of every short-term fix I had ever watched cause a long-term disaster, and I had grown up in a species that has an extraordinary gift for that particular pattern. We are very good at solving the immediate problem in a way that quietly builds the next one. It is, in a backward way, one of our most consistent traits. The sisters paused the session. They reviewed the projections over 3 days. They came back with a counter-proposal that took longer to implement and cost more in the short run, and held together the way things hold together when they're built right rather than built fast. The Orith representative, a being named Castle Ian who had a voice like gravel in a metal drum, told me privately afterward that the counter-proposal was better than anything their own advisors had produced. "How did you know?" she asked. I thought about it. "We've made that mistake before," I said, "as a species. Enough times that I recognized the shape of it." She didn't say anything to that, but she didn't look skeptical either. The 2nd-year anniversary of the announcement fell on a Tuesday. I remembered because I had a call scheduled with my mother that evening, which I had been rescheduling for 3 weeks and genuinely needed to stop rescheduling. She asked me how I was doing. I told her I was well. She asked if the alien sisters were treating me properly and I told her yes, though the hours were unpredictable. She said that sounded like my father's job, which it did, a little. She asked if I had made any friends. I told her I was working on it. She told me not to work too hard at it or it wouldn't happen naturally. I told Sorvin about that conversation the next morning. Not because it was relevant to anything, just because it had stuck with me. Sorvin listened in that total way she had, the gold light under her skin shifting slightly. "Your mother is correct," she said after a moment. "Most things that are forced stop being what they were." "She's a school librarian," I said. "She has strong opinions about most things." "I would like to meet her," Sorvin said. I almost fell off my chair, which would have been undignified, but I am used to that. My name appears on the Galactic feed most days still. The commentary has shifted over time. Less bewilderment, more something that I can only describe as a careful watching, other species paying attention to what the human does next. Not because they think I'm remarkable, most of them still don't, but because they are beginning to understand, I think, that remarkable was never the qualification. I still get lost on level 2 sometimes. The corridors there are genuinely confusing. I have stopped being embarrassed about it, which is its own kind of progress. What I have learned, across all of it, is something I probably already knew and just hadn't put words to. That the thing the galaxy found baffling about my species was never our strength or our ambition or our intelligence. It was the fact that we are afraid, openly and often, and we act anyway. That we fail, sometimes publicly and badly, and we say so, and then we get up. That we have not optimized away the memory of smallness because we have not been alive long enough to forget it. And somewhere in that inexperience is something the oldest beings in known space had spent 40,000 years trying to locate in the species around them. I am not special. I was never special. That, it turns out, was exactly the point.